Well, thank you very much, Adela, for this wonderful presentation. And thank you all for being here. I do understand that this is not the main event in this town tonight, so I appreciate that, that you came to take a few minutes, couple hours with me. So VozMob, as we like to call it, mobile voices in English, voces móviles in Spanish, VozMob for short, which is also the internet address, is a research action project. So it's really deploying a new system in collaboration with users, and at the same time reflecting on what we are doing together, what they are doing with the system, and how we may be helping, we may be learning from their experience. So the main goal of the project, as defined by the users, is this statement. The idea, the people we're working with are migrant workers in Los Angeles, immigrant workers, mostly day laborers, people who take jobs by the day, usually in construction, gardening, but also domestic workers and people who take other jobs, but the initial population has been mostly day laborers. Their definition of what they are doing with VozMob is to help themselves project their voice by appropriating mobile phones for popular communication. The idea is to take those phones that were not designed for what they are doing to tell stories. Storytelling is at the core of what VozMob is doing. This simplicity Adela was talking about is essentially people want to tell stories about their lives. And they tell stories with words, with pictures, with sounds, with video as well. And when I say this like this, it may sound like something you can do in many ways with the internet and with cell phones. You may have sent pictures to Facebook, Flickr, various services using your cell phone, and so some of those services are available. None of them are quite available in the way we're making them available, and many of them do require some of these fancy phones. Smartphones, phones with internet connections. Again, one of the really important aspects of this project is to make it available on basically any phone, even the cheapest ones. So that mission statement is qualified by all kinds of requirements that we've tried to pursue jointly in this project to really make it as available as possible. We wanted something that was extremely cheap. So not $500 phones, but $20 phones. Any phone with a camera, essentially, which is any phone you can get. I mean, I've been buying used phones for $20 that can serve this purpose. We wanted something that was intuitive, that didn't require much training. So using the phone in a way that's as close as possible to the way users have been using it, and all the way to the very basic feature of speaking into the phone to tell your story, taking pictures with the camera and being able to send that as easily as possible, to share it as easily as possible. We wanted something that works with any phone, so not just Nokia phone or Siemens phones or Samsung phone. That turns out to be a really big challenge from a technical standpoint. Every phone is different, using different operating system, and having something that works across all of them is really quite tricky. We also wanted it to work with any network, so not just Telefonica or Orange or AT&T, but any carrier. That also turns out to be very, very complicated because each carrier has their own idea about how they should format messages, sounds, pictures, etc. We wanted a system that had some reasonable degree of privacy protection so that we could retain personal information from our users. We think it's very important to users to be able to decide how much they want to share. And when you send a picture to Flickr, you don't know exactly how much is going out. Your phone knows an awful lot about you. It knows where you are by knowing which tower you talk to. It knows who you are because it has your number. It knows when you are doing this because there's a timestamp on it. So if you combine all this together, if you're sending pictures talking, you're essentially leaving a very detailed diary of your activities. That may be fine in some circumstances, but in other circumstances you may not wish to disclose this. So we wanted to design a system that allowed us to destroy some of that information or to not retain it. We wanted a system that would customize so it would fit our way. And when I say our way, it's not the researchers' ways, but the ways of using this that all the users, the day laborers, the NGO we worked with, and the researchers wanted to develop. So that pushed us to design a system using open source software that we could customize. We wanted something that was multilingual, so when it gets to the web, we want to be able to translate. As you'll see, most of the stories we have today are in Spanish because the population we work with comes from Latin America and Central America. But we're planning also other populations. We were looking at working in India with the same system. So we need something that can be translated in various languages and something that works in many countries if possible. One of the goals of the project is to be able to put in touch some migrant communities in various locations to see how the system gets adopted, and appropriated differently in different environments. So when you add up all those conditions, you get something that's actually, as Adela was saying, complicated because we want to make it simple. So that's really what pushed us to develop this system that we call VOSMOB. And maybe what I should just do is give you a quick look at the website itself. So this is what it looks like. For the moment, it's a very plain format. It's in the process of being redesigned, and I'll show you some of that in a moment. But for the moment, when people take pictures or videos, those just get sent to this blog. People also then come back to the blog and can edit the pictures if they want. They can make changes. As you'll see, many of the stories come very quickly. So some of these stories I haven't seen. They just were sent a few hours, minutes, days ago from California. What you'll see is the people using the system are reporting on what matters to their lives. Right now, there is a very important law being passed that was just passed in the state of Arizona that actually requires the police to check the immigration status of people who they think might not be in the country legally, and if they discover they're not in the country legally, then to detain them and expel them. This is very new and a very serious, very concerning step because the rule until now was that there was no right of the police to stop somebody based essentially on the color of their skin to check their right to be in the country. There were other things they could do to arrest people, but not that one. So this one pushes the ball even further. So again, the community we work with, day laborers, are becoming very active through this system by denouncing that law and using that as a way to coordinate some of their actions. So most of the posts I was showing you actually were created on a computer, but not on a cell phone. This one looks like a video that was sent from a cell phone. I'm going to click on this. And normally it should play when I do this, but we have a little bug this week that we're in the process of solving. So I'm going to have to go look at the video. But just to show you what this looks like.
The gateway to the American dream, the true America of true democracy. And sa lahat ng mga Pilipino, lahat ng mga migrante, imigrante, sumali na kayo dito sa Broadway Analytics, 10 a.m. sa Sabado, para tumindig tayo. Kailangan makita na tayo para sa ating mga karapatan. Kung hindi tayo, sino? Kung hindi ngayon, kailan? Ngayon ang panahon na. Salamat po.
So what you're seeing here is a video that's taken on a very basic cell phone that is sent via multimedia messaging to an email address, and that gets pulled by our website to be posted on the site. So again, I want to emphasize the fact that it's a very intuitive operation. You take the video with your camera. In this case, the sound is recording directly by the phone camera, and then send it to an email address, and that gets posted. Much more simple than what you would have to do otherwise, which is take it with a camera, connect the camera to a computer, download it on the computer, edit the video on the computer, then upload it to some site, which requires tools that most migrants do not have. Now we'll come back to looking at some of the pictures in a moment, but just I want to emphasize at the start, so this is really a partnership. This is a joint project between an organization called IDEPSCA, the Institute for Popular Education of Southern California, which works with migrants, and the Annenberg School, the place where I work, at the University of Southern California. We've conceived this project together, we manage it together, we have a governance structure for the project that decides jointly how we invest the money, which is a very unusual thing to do in academia. Typically, academics will conceive a project and observe a population, but do not design the project jointly with the population. We've decided to do that for a variety of reasons, but in particular because that's one of the objects of the study, to understand collaborative participatory design. And we've learned a lot from this. We've had a lot of work to do, but it's also a very rich experience. The project, just to thank them briefly, has been supported by a number of organizations, funders, the Social Science Research Council in the US, the MacArthur Foundation. We did get some support from Nokia as well, who gave us some funds and some money. And then the Annenberg program on online community is supporting us. And N2Y4 is a part of a project that helps nonprofits use technology and would give us some support through winning a project, a competition that they had. So let me talk a little bit about IDEPSCA. IDEPSCA works, again, with migrant workers. And one of the things they do, they have many different programs, but one of them is to run day labor centers in the city of Los Angeles. Day labor in Los Angeles, until they came, was a very unorganized activity. People who were looking for jobs would congregate on the parking lots of building supply stores and really wait for builders to come with their truck to get supplies and then to hire them. In some cases, that meant many people waiting at the corner, struggling to be at the front of the line and trying to get the job. And the city of LA ended up giving a grant to this organization to help bring a little bit of more sanity to this market and to this labor market. And so IDEPSCA has organized 6 centers within the city, and they also work in labor corners, which are not organized centers like this, where they are providing a nicer environment for people to wait for jobs and people to come and meet them, where they're giving some guidance on labor laws, labor conditions, helping ensure that the workers are not taken advantage of, which is something that happens very often in this labor market, providing also all kinds of other services in those labor centers while the workers are waiting, from health education to English as a second language to there are games they can play, etc. These centers are where we aim to organize this project, because it's actually a nice environment for us to meet with the day laborers. It's one where they often have time because they're waiting for jobs, and so it's good for us as a way to provide them with something to do while they wait and to connect with them in this way. One of the core motivation for the people we worked with came from this. One day we had several meetings with them, several workshops during which we discussed what kind of project we could do. And one of them Googled the word day laborers to see what would come back. What does the internet think of day laborers? And the very first result that comes up is a hate site. It's an anti-immigrant hate site, and as you can see, the tagline is, "Some of the most violent murderers, rapists, and child molesters are illegal aliens who work as day laborers." If you go down the list, you see that the majority of the sites that come back have the same kind of negative a view of day laborers. And the people were so shocked by this and so moved by this that one of their motivation for this project is to tell real stories about their lives, to say what they do. And in fact, they're not violent rapists, child molesters, of course. I mean, there are people who are here to work, who are contributing to society, and they want to be able to tell that story. This is a story that never makes it in the mainstream media in the United States. It never is told by newspapers, never by television stations. So one of the goals of the project is to provide a channel by which those stories can be told by the day laborers about themselves. And in an unmediated fashion. That site, if you go to it, you see this picture. This is one of the traditional tactics of the anti-immigrant hate groups in the U.S. They will go to these day labor corners and provoke people until they get a reaction, and then they film the reaction and post that to the web as a way to say, see, this is what happens. This is what you don't want in your neighborhood. In fact, day laborers do have families, they do respect laws, they do contribute to society, and they really want to be able to tell their stories. One of the interesting background fact here is that if you look at a map of where there is digital access in the city of Los Angeles, you see in green places with lots of access, which tend to be the rich neighborhoods, and in red the places with limited access. This is an index of technology accessibility, which tend to map fairly well with areas where immigrants live. And they have, by and large, lower access than the average population to digital technology. Which is, again, one of the incentives to use tools they have, the cell phones. So we tried to think about what we could do. There was this sense, both in the community and among our research group, that cell phones would be a good idea. So we went to a couple of day labor centers and just did some surveys, to ask people, what phone do you have? We took pictures of their phones and then asked them, what do you do with your phone? What features do you have? What plans do you use? How much do you spend on it? And some of the results that are really striking here is that most of them do have cell phones. So 78% did have a cell phone. Some had several cell phones, which is something we're finding with immigrants in Spain as well. Those who don't have cell phones often can access a cell phone from a friend, so they will have some experience with using them. In the US, we found that 30% had a prepaid plan, which doesn't sound like a big number in Europe, but in the US it is a big number. Prepaid is not a very common thing in the US. It was something that the US discovered from Europe late. So it's a very high proportion, a much higher proportion than the rest of the population. And what was also striking to me was the amount of money they spend on their phones. That the expenses varied between $20 and $180 per month, which is enormous. Half of them paid more than $50 a month, and many of them paid that money not by choice, or not. It was in many cases unplanned. It was more that they got trapped by the usage charges. That every month they thought they could control them, but then they need to use the phone, and it goes higher. In many cases, this is on prepaid plans that they keep having to recharge to be able to still be in touch, because some of them may not qualify for a postpaid plan where you need some credit and residence information, etc. In terms of what people did with their phone, who were the communities, the people that they're trying to stay in touch with, really, what you would expect: families, friends, work connections, and also using them in case of emergency. But it was striking that almost all of them said that the phone was critical for them for work. In this case, it is really to be reachable. For day laborers, the idea is that they want a place where, when they've worked for somebody, that person can call them back if there is work another day. Many of them carry business cards where they print their phone number, so that if an employer is pleased with their work, they can then call them back and reach them. So that's really what they mean by using the phone for work. That may not mean calling on the phone for work, but just having it to be reachable. This is also interesting. We've done with Mireia, who was here, some work in Latin America, looking at what were the most important features of having a phone for poor people, and this whole idea of being reachable, being that somebody can get to you is really often essential, as opposed to what we think of the phone, which is talking on the phone, right? That's having a phone to be able to reach out to people. It turns out that being reachable is at least as important in many cases. In terms of the services they use on their phone, a number of them send text. Many of them did receive text, so it's interesting that there is more reception than sending of text here again. For poor people, often the texts are communication by employers, by friends, telling them something, and they're less able to send messages by text because that's expensive for them. So they're very careful with that, but they tend to receive some. Many of them, almost half, like to take pictures with their phones. Very few can send pictures because that's quite expensive to send them with MMS. So it's especially if you don't have any discount plan for that, which was one of the really interesting finding from this exploratory research, that many people described one of the problems they had as the problem of trapped pictures. They had taken many pictures with their phones and they had filled up the memory, and they were stuck. They didn't know what to do with them. The only way they could share those pictures was by showing them on the screen to their friends, but they didn't know how to download them, print them, send them in any way. And all those pictures had very strong meaning to them. And so they couldn't delete any of them and make space to take more pictures. So they were stuck. They had a full phone full of pictures. And I guess the only possibility was just to buy a new phone and fill that one up again. And that's that was one of the impetus for us to think about, well, what can we do with those pictures? How can we share them, help them send those pictures to others? A number of them also took videos. Fewer sent videos, again, because sending videos tend to be also more expensive. But this idea that the phones are used in many ways beyond just talking on them was an important one, and this idea of finding a way to deal with the pictures was one of the motivations for the project. Again, what we tried to do with this project together was to create a system that could give a voice to people who don't have a voice in the traditional public debate. We started working with a small group of day laborers who had been writing a newsletter by day laborers for day laborers. So they had an interest in storytelling, and they had run into some difficulties writing these newsletters in the sense of having a hard time collecting stories from the laborers, having a hard time getting together to edit the newsletter and print it, format it, distribute it. So in fact, that was a project that started in 2007 in fall, and this was actually the only edition of their newsletter. That was number 1 from the first year. There was no number 2 and no following years. It was such a big, difficult problem to do this that they were not able to do a next issue. And so they saw the idea of using phones as a way to tell stories as an interesting extension or replacement of what the newsletter was doing. In terms of the process of our project, we've been meeting with them for now about a year and a half, every Tuesday evening in workshops, which are very much using an approach that's inspired from popular education, from Paulo Freire's theories of looking at ways in which people can tell their own stories and telling stories around tools, around circumstances that are very familiar to them. And in a way, it's been interesting for us to use the phone as the excuse to explore politics of relationships around the phones, which is, again, very much inspired by Paulo Freire. And also to use strategies of participatory design. So we're not trying to design a system for them, but we're trying to play with the phones together and then figure out how to design the systems in ways that fit their common, their everyday use, and that where we can bring maybe some technical expertise, but we don't invent it for our users. We get the users to tell us what their experience is, and together we come up with some of the applications. That what I described about the stories on what happens to the photos is a good example of that. So those workshops are workshops that assemble day laborers with some representatives of IDEPSCA, some community organizers, and some of my students at USC. So how do you tell stories with mobile phones? Well, several ways. You know, the obvious one is you tell the stories. You just call the story repository and talk in the phone and tell your story. Another one is you can take pictures and do photo reporting and show what you want to talk about. Another one is what Adela was referring to as these narrated slideshows. You know, you take pictures and then you talk to describe what the picture is doing, or you can take movies. And I'd like to take you through some of the steps we took, again, in this participatory design fashion to get to the system we have today. So first, we looked at ways in which you could say what you have to say, in ways you can tell a story with the cell phones. The first thing we did was to use a system that's called GCast, that was an internet service where there was a phone number you could call, 8888 VOSMOP, so we could customize our phone number in some way. Once you call that, you had to press in numbers to get to the right compartment of this website. You needed to know a PIN, a number, an identification number, and then you could finally record what you had to say. This one didn't work too well for us because all the prompts were in English. It was a lot of numbers to enter in the system, and many people somehow failed at some stage in this. They entered the wrong number, they didn't have the PIN, etc., and they weren't able to do this. But let me show you what this is like. So essentially it ends up on a website, which is no longer active by the way, but where basically you would get a phone story.
Están haciendo un argumento sobre los paleteros, los compañeros jornaleros que andan vendiendo paletas en las calles. Parece que se los llevan en la mañana y los dejan poner en algunos vecindarios a vender. Y creo que les dan su salario más algo de...
I'm going to stop it here. You get the idea, but again, that's a very conceptually intuitive way to tell a story. You know, you use your phone the way it's meant to be used to talk. You can actually do that from a cell phone or from any phone. Call a number, and that voice gets converted into an MP3 file and posted onto a website. Next step is we did that in a way that was more customized and more open source for us. One of the problems with that site is that it went out of business in the middle of our experimentation with it, so we couldn't use it anymore. It was also something that was capturing a lot of information about the phones that the people were using, so phone numbers, privacy information that we could not control. So we switched to another system where we're using a voice over IP application called Gizmo. And that application allows you to leave a voicemail and have that voicemail turned into an attachment to an email, and that email gets sent to our website. So again, that's one of the complicated things Adela was referring to backstage as a way to get something that's really simple for the user. Where here we just have one number, we can record the message, it's basically an answering machine, so the message is in Spanish, and you hear the beep and you start talking. You've got 2 minutes to leave your story, and when you stop, that story gets sent to our site, and it gets posted directly to the Mobile Voices site, where we have put this logo. If somebody clicks on the logo, you hear the story.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Manuel Mancilla, nuevamente corresponsal de Voces Móviles, y estamos otra vez transmitiendo.
I don't know if I can increase the volume here.
Oh, está un amigo por aquí que les quiere mandar un saludo. Buenos días, mi nombre es Miguel Rodríguez de Harbor City. Quiero mandarles un saludo y a la vez agradecerles el sacrificio que están haciendo para que los derechos de nuestra comunidad latina sean respetados. En especial al compañero César Santolaya, pero es en general a todas las personas que están haciendo este sacrificio, y que sigan adelante, y espero que al final de todo salga muy bien. Muchas gracias, hasta luego.
Okay, I'm going to stop here as well. Again, what is behind this is a very intuitive practice where you talk in your phone and you pass it to the person you're interviewing and they can continue the story. So you can pass it along to different people and they just talk in it the way they know how to talk in it. No complicated recording of MP3s, downloading on the computer, uploading the MP3 to a blog, which is the normal way in which you would upload a sound file onto a blog. That intuitive nature of this is again very important to us. Now you notice on this that the number is actually sent automatically by the system. We've had to program something that blanks it out, otherwise you display the calling number. Because we're using this system called Drupal that's open source and that lets us modify the code, we've been able to do that. Again, complexity in the background to lead to something simple in the foreground. Our next step, though, is to really try to incorporate all the phone features within the server using this software called Asterisk, which is essentially a phone company on the computer, which has some nice hooks as well with the Drupal content management system. And I can talk more about this if you're interested, but I don't want to bore you with some of those technical details. So that's the first mode in which people have been telling stories, just calling a number and telling them. The second one has been just taking pictures and sending those pictures. What you're seeing here is a number of pictures that were taken, I think at the end of 2008, in the time leading to the presidential election, where many day laborers who were not allowed to vote wanted to find a way to express their opinion about the outcome of the election. And they decided to stage a hunger strike in downtown Los Angeles. And they used our system as a way to communicate with supporters outside of Los Angeles and to receive messages of support from people outside. So they took lots of pictures of what was going on. So you see speakers, banners, people as at the bottom here camping in tents during the hunger strike, and essentially just send them to our website. So that was also a way to tell stories just by taking pictures. And once you know the context, you understand a lot about what's going on. And finally, something that we didn't really think of at the beginning that really emerged from experimentation with the system is those narrated pictures or talking postcards, or we don't quite know, as Adela was saying, how to call them. It would be interesting to have a really good name for what this is. It's a very interesting medium. So it's a picture or a series of pictures with a narration, with a voice. Here you're seeing a number of pictures that were taken by one of the members of our team, who is a household worker who lives in downtown Los Angeles and cleans houses very often on the west side of Los Angeles, where some of the richer people live, and she takes the bus between those two places. And she's done interviews of people on public transit. So that's what you see here. So maybe I'll play this story, which has a bit of background noise from the bus. I hope it's going to be possible to hear.
Su nombre, por favor. Jacqueline Rivera. ¿Qué opina del ayuno por la legalización? Que es algo que deberíamos de hacerlo todos, pues a todos nos conviene la legalización y uno lo hace y todos alcanzamos, ¿verdad? Y es una obligación de todos los que queremos estar legales en este país, ¿verdad? Muchas gracias.
So as you see, very short stories, again, this is quite intuitive to do. I don't know if you've ever done it on your phone, but I'm sure most of your phones are able to do this. You take a picture, and then once you've taken a picture, usually it tells you, do you want to send it? So you say yes. And as you do this, your phone will put you into a software that helps you compose a multimedia message. And you can start adding elements to that multimedia message. So you choose to add sound, and the phone tells you, press on the button and record it. You can do that. And that creates this slideshow that has a picture and a soundtrack that you can then send to typically another phone. But what we're doing here is appropriating that system in a way to send it to an email address that is then forwarded to our website. again, that the simplicity of that capture mode is very interesting, because snapping a picture with your phone is something that's fairly intuitive. Talking into it or having somebody talk into it is also intuitive. Now the question is blending the two together. Once those pictures are sent to our site, you can actually combine them. Some of the some of the MMSs will have several slideshows. But if I show you this picture here, this is a combination of several such interviews that person has done with the pictures of the 4 people she's interviewed and the soundtracks.
¿Su nombre, por favor?
Betty.
Betty. ¿Qué opina usted acerca del ayuno que se celebra en la Placita Olvera para legalizar a 12 millones de habitantes en la Unión Americana?
Me parece correctísimo. Gente que viene, que trabaja, que lucha, que arranca de la tierra lo que comemos y los frutos y las verduras. ¿Y por qué no tienen derecho a sentirse ciudadanos ellos también, como cualquier otro ser humano que vive acá? No son gente honesta, gente trabajadora, luchadora, y merece ser ciudadana.
Muchas gracias.
¿Ya está? Bueno.
I'll just stop here. You can also visit the site to see more of the content. So you get some sense of the way this works. You get also a sense of the themes of the stories, many of them having to do with immigration, legalization of immigration. Many of them also have to do with very daily activities of day laborers, of what happens in the centers, visits they have by people who will help them by donating food or providing health services. Again, one of their central idea is to project stories about this daily life that will eventually counteract some of the negative views that are in the media. So as I said, most of the system is built on open source software, Drupal, which is that little logo on the left, and all the content is licensed under Creative Commons, because ultimately we're hoping it will get reused. And we already have had quite a bit of interest from various newspapers, some radio stations in reusing some of the content as part of their programming. That's one of the goals as well, to make it possible to bridge those stories into the mainstream media. Let me sort of describe some of the features of the system. So again, people use their phone as a way to send stories to the system. It's designed so it works with any phone or provider. You don't need data plans, which is an important aspect. It works on prepaid phones. In the US, we've been able to buy MMS in bundles, which cost a lot less money. So for about $5, you get 200 messages. You have to use them within a month, so that limits a little bit of the interest. But that gets to a level that's really affordable. As an aside, Spain is hugely expensive. It's on average about €1 per message to send some of those things. And this is the most expensive country I've run into so far. You can get it a little bit cheaper with the 4th operator, Yoigo, who's selling MMS for 30 cents of €1. It's still a lot of money, but not quite as much. And that is a puzzle to me, because just like SMS, MMS is a service that costs almost nothing to the operator, because it's asynchronous. Essentially, you can wait till there is network capacity available to send it, and at that time, capacity is free. It doesn't create congestion. Essentially, nobody cares whether an MMS will take 1 second or 20 seconds to arrive. It doesn't matter. So you just wait for the silence between the phone conversations and then you send it. And just like SMS, if people start to use it a lot, it can be a huge revenue source for the phone companies. But in Spain, it is so expensive that I have yet to encounter people who've been using it before. I mean, people have been using it occasionally, but this is, by making it so expensive, they've really cut the consumption to a level that probably doesn't generate very many revenues. So that is a bit of a puzzle, and I'm curious to at some point meet with some of the phone carriers and try to understand why that is so expensive, why they're really discouraging the use. It's true to some extent in the US as well, that it's been more expensive than SMS, and it's not very encouraged. It's difficult to use very often, but not quite as much as here, and it's the traffic has taken off. So again, posting from phone is easy using voice calls, SMS, or MMS. I didn't mention that, but we can also send SMS, which will just be a text that's posted on the blog. Now it gets onto the main server, the content management system based on Drupal, where people can edit their stories, remix them, assemble together pictures and sound from different stories, but also do all kinds of other processing, tag them with keywords. We do translation of stories that came in Spanish into English, because again, one of our goals is bridging a conversation, and then sharing those pictures, sharing them via email, printing them. We can do a whole series of things, again, because the open source software allows us to do that. One of the things we've started to do and we're hoping to develop is then be able to send stories from the website to the phones. And you could do that in many ways. People could go to the website and think that one of their friends would like the story, so you forward it, or you could subscribe to stories. You could either say anytime that person sends a story, I want it on my phone, or every time a story comes in with that keyword, I want it on my phone, or just send me a random story every day. Any of these things are possible, and again, we're experimenting and discussing with our users about what might make sense for them. The other thing we're doing is trying to be as universally accessible as possible and to find ways to recycle the stories. So we can print the stories on paper, which is also something that's very important to people, to be able to show it to friends, send them by old-fashioned mail to their family. Export it to other content. One of the things we did during the hunger strike is reuse the audio from the stories and broadcast that over low-power FM station as a way to expand the reach of those voices. And one of the things that's done now every 3 months is what the Day Laborer is set up to do, which is write a newsletter that takes content from the website to create stories. And here is one of the latest copies of that newsletters, where all the pictures were taken by phone, sent to the site. In many cases, the text was then added to the stories on the site by people when they came to a computer, and then all that gets recycled in a way and reused, repurposed into a newsletter that can then be distributed directly, physically, on the day labor corners and in the day labor centers, which is again a very important way for those stories to get out. So this idea of having multiple media, multiple outlets is one that's really important to the project. The next thing we're doing, which is in development now, is to capture the location of those stories and be able to map them. This is maybe not so important for the day laborers we're working with at this point, but more important for some other communities we're working with, in particular an organization that addresses renters' rights and is trying to use this system to document bad housing conditions. And since the phone knows where it is, you can obfuscate that a little bit by making it fuzzy so that you don't violate the privacy of people. But when people really do want to say, to tag the pictures with a location, you can do that. And so another way to tell a story is to show a map where there are things that happen in different parts of a story of a city, and we're aiming to do that. Now, each step of the design of the system is again following this participatory approach, and the latest one we've done is to think about the look and feel of the site. So we've had a number of workshops looking at different sites and trying to think about what should be on the front page, how should things be edited, what is the process by which we choose what stories are features, which resulted in a layout that we're just implementing within the next couple of weeks. And so the site will look like this in a couple of weeks when we next look at it, with a feature story and then recent threads of stories and various ways to access the stories that are in the site database. So I wanted to show you some of the stories. I've done some of that, and I don't want to take too much time. This one we've already seen. I'll just show this one because it's a nice example also of many of the stories which document daily activities by the members of this community.
Buenos días. ¿Qué es lo que están haciendo?
Buenos días. Un poco de cemento para que no haya mucha polvareda. Tú sabes que mucho viento y el polvo molesta a la gente, ¿no? Eso es lo que estamos tratando, de que ya no haya polvareda. Gracias.
Okay, de nada.
So this, by the way, was an MMS that was initially sent with 3 pictures. So the pictures cycle, and you hear the soundtrack. Again, it's an interesting example of the themes people pick for their stories. There are some stories about gardeners. The IDEPSCA's organized a cooperative of gardeners who, again, work as day laborers in many parts of Los Angeles, but who have been trained to do sustainable gardening, water conservation, and they're again using this system as a way to document much of what they're doing. One of the members decided to write a story on graffiti in the city and try to understand where it came from, and has actually written a story that will be in the next newsletter. Another one talks about hands of workers, etc. So you can go to the site and see many of those. There are over 5,000 stories at this point which have been created this way. This, as I said, this is an action research project, and part of the research framework that's behind this, very briefly, is looking at theories of appropriation, trying to understand how people take technology that was not meant for them and reshape it and rearrange it, remix it, appropriate it in ways that serve their interests better, and in the process of doing that, create new technology and invent new possibilities. So what you're seeing here is this idea of the cyclical pattern where suppliers, Nokias, and operators will make technology available. Users have a choice to take it or not to take it. But as soon as they take it, they will tend to appropriate it. And they do this in various ways, which I've taken to call baroquization, creolization, and cannibalization. But without getting into too much of the detail, it's really a way to describe the extent to which the appropriation is hostile or not to the thing that is appropriated, the way in which there is a power tension between what is offered by the suppliers and what is taken by the users. In some cases, users appropriate technology by following a script that was provided to them by those making the technology. In some cases, they just take over the technology, and that's more cannibalization. What they invent, in turn, can be reclaimed by suppliers in various ways. They can decide that they like it and integrate it into their next services, or they can adapt it, change it so it fits better their business plans, or they can decide to block it and make it impossible. Several of the technologies we're using are being blocked, and especially MMS. In some ways, one of the big problems we've had is that in the US, phones need to be configured for each carrier to be able to send MMS. And it used to be that it was fairly easy to download the configuration parameters. You could do that from the site of the carriers or the site from the cell phone providers. And those configuration sites have been disappearing. So in a way, they're blocking what we're doing, which is taking our phones to use their service and do something different. Now, you can only do it with phones you buy from them. So if you buy your phone from ATT, the phone is set up to send MMS from ATT. So we're now trying to come up with different strategies to get around this. And one of them is to use a Motorola site to program Nokia phones, which seems to work. A number of interesting ways to do this, but that keeps us going in this cycle. In the process of this, you create new technology that can then be appropriated in different ways. But most of the things we're looking at with this VOSMA project fit in that first step of how users appropriate phone technology. And here are some of the questions we're exploring. What is possible with really cheap technology? And one of the surprising findings is quite a lot. I mean, you can actually do much more than we imagined initially. And especially the discovery for us of this narrated slideshow as a way to communicate is something that we really didn't expect at the beginning. Another finding is the way in which what I call transitional technologies like SMS and MMS have a lot more potential than what they're given credit for. Today, all the excitement is on iPhones and fancy smartphones, but in fact, you can do a lot of that by using much, much cheaper, much more basic technology. So SMS, though texting, has proven to have amazing possibilities by building on top of that platform. So things like Twitter, like Ushahidi, many services that expand SMS by providing other things. I've taken that technology that was meant to be an afterthought and a transitional one to something that can really be very powerful. MMS has not gone that way yet, but we're hoping to participate in making it go that way. We're also finding a really interesting outcome in the behavior of people and the way in which they get access to technology, that phones tend to be what we call a gateway technology. So people who we are working with, in some cases, never had a phone before and never had used a computer. But by taking pictures, they start establishing a presence on the internet, and that draws them into doing things with those pictures. So that motivates them to go see those pictures, edit them, learn how to write stories about them. And they've been drawn into a very sophisticated form of multimedia literacy by just starting with a picture, by starting a very simple use of a cell phone. That is quite different from the strategies that have been used, at least in the US, but also in some developing countries, to try to bridge the digital divide and teach people how to use computers, which tend to be very instrumental, very didactic, where you put people together in a room and you tell them, today we will learn how to use Microsoft Word, and that's how you will learn to write a CV that may help you get a job. So there is a script of how you go from no media literacy to being able to use computers. And we found that starting with something very simple, like taking a picture and then having that as an excuse to learn more about the computer functions, can be very powerful. That again resonates very strongly with Paulo Freire's ideas, where he used a shovel in one of his demonstrations of, starting by looking at the function of a shovel in a worker's life, understanding the politics of the shovel, who's using it for, who benefits from the labor, etc. We're using the phone and the picture as the starting point, but building things around it. We're also spending quite a bit of time in the research evaluating this participatory design process, which is cumbersome but fruitful, and looking at the power relationships that are embedded within this, the productivity of that process. Currently finishing a paper on this. We're also looking at the role of storytelling and building communities within organizations like IDEPSCA, but also bridging communities between the migrants and the host community. We're hoping to be able to assess impact. That's something we'll do a little bit later when we roll out the system more broadly. And really, to me, one of the big interests is examining the surprises, again, such as the discovery of what you can do with MMS, the power of being able to organize actions around these systems, etc. So all these are research direction that we're following. I was just talking about MMS as one of the things that we've started to understand better and look at. But it's really a very close technology. It's one that is often should be easy to use and can be easy to use once you've set up the phone correctly, but getting there is often difficult. Again, you need to get those settings from the carriers. What we're using in this system is multimedia message to email gateways. So if instead of sending your MMS to a phone number, you send it to an email address, which is what we do, all the carriers have gateways that will convert the MMS into an email. But they do that in very different ways. So some of them will just transform all the pictures into standard attachments, JPEGs and all the sounds into nicely behaved MP3 or WAV files, and then send that as attachment with the email, which is then very easy for us to deal with. Others will decide to use proprietary formats, which we then have to convert, adapt, change. And yet others will decide that they will store store all the media on their own website and just send you a pointer to that media, which means you can't really see it on a phone. You have to use a computer to see it. So we've actually programmed little subroutines that will just go to those sites, suck in all the media, and post it on our site. So having to play hide and seek really with the carriers, because they change the way in which they do that periodically, so we have to write these filters that will take the emails that come in and convert that into posts on our system, has been a really interesting and challenging technological issue. I think by having no standardization, closed system, expensive and complex to use MMS, the carriers are really missing a huge innovation potential because people are not using it, they're not experimenting with it, they're not discovering what can you really do with those narrated pictures, and therefore they're really missing out. And one of the policy recommendations that would come out of it would be to liberate all transitional technologies like SMS and MMS. I think actually that would be in the interest of the carriers and the cell phone makers. So maybe at one point we'll convert them. All the research we're doing is done in an open way, and I believe this will probably be posted somewhere, but we have blogs that document what we're finding, what we're thinking. I teach a class that is in conjunction with this project, where we discuss some of the theories that are at play in the project, and the website for the class is online as well. We have a wiki that we use. We're using delicious tags as a way to tag things we find on the web that connect to our systems. We also are releasing and publishing the code continuously every time we make changes. So it's set up as a way so that anybody who would like to use it can just subscribe to it and download the system at this point. I could go to those sites, but probably don't have time since we're getting very close to the time when we need to get ready for the game, right? Next step, very briefly, what we're doing is we're finishing the theming, the layout of the site. We're training trainers that will then teach other people how to use the system. We're just about to roll it out within most of the worker centers at IDEPSCA, to use it with many other groups in the US. LACAN, which is the Los Angeles Community Action Network, working with homeless residents of Los Angeles. The Southern California Library is one that's interested, and non-US groups such as the one Adela was talking about, working here with Bolivian immigrants. We're looking at working with communities in India as well. Part of the interest in doing that is deploying this system within different user communities and see what comes out of it. It's exploring this appropriation idea and hoping that different things will come up with it. By this fall, we'll distribute it in a way that's very simple to use. So it will be packaged in a box where you get a CD and you can just install that on a computer and start your own server using VOSMob. Doing also a profile, what's called a Drupal install profile, that allows you to just unpack the whole system directly. There are a number of things we need, so if anybody has technological expertise, or if you have friends who are programmers, this is, we always need help in programming filters for the various carriers. And one of the things we're hoping to do is get rid of using these MMS to email gateway from the carriers and be able to send MMS directly from our server. And we're adding, as I said, geolocation. Just briefly, I need to thank everybody who has been involved in this, and I'm probably forgetting some of them in this credit because it's been a long list of people, and the various founders we've had, and Renee Templeton, from whom I stole many of the pictures in this. But thank you very much for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer questions.